Welcome back, everyone. My name is Sam.
And I'm Melissa.
I was raised in a family with 4 moms and 34 siblings. We were members of the FLDS church, which is run by Warren Jeffs, who is now serving a lifetime in prison.
I was raised in the mainstream LDS church in Utah. Sam and I have been married for almost 10 years now and have 2 awesome kids.
Yes, we do. And we want to quickly thank our donors, YouTube members, and our patrons on Patreon. Thank you so much for your support.
Yes, today we are back at reacting to Polygamy USA. We are on episode number 5, and this is all about the Centennial Park group that was just right over the hill from Short Creek where Sam grew up. Yep. They are another fundamentalist Mormon community, and we've been following a couple of the families and watching their journeys as polygamous families and seeing how their beliefs line up with the FLDS beliefs that Sam grew up in and some of the LDS beliefs that I grew up in as well.
Yes, and it's been very intriguing for me to watch this documentary, Polygamy USA, because even though I lived so close in proximity to them, they seemed like they lived in a completely different world. It seemed so, and I don't know if it was intended this way by them anyway, but it was very secretive from us. We weren't really allowed to mingle with them as they were considered in the FLDS eyes as apostates because they had chosen to leave what we thought was the truth. So it was very eye-opening to see a little bit more about their journey and their lifestyle.
It seemed like the feeling was mutual because at one point in this episode, the Colley family went to go get water, right, up at the canyon.
Yeah.
And now, granted, the Colley family has like cameras and stuff following them. So I'm sure that made the FLDS people even more like on high alert. But they had people following them, watching them, recording them with their phones, kind of intimidating them. And the Colley father was saying like, I'm from here. We only left in the 80s. Like, I'm from here. We have ties to this community. And yet it feels like these 2 like rivals that can't get along and they like don't want us here and they're trying to intimidate us. So it's interesting how that break-off obviously was like a rough breakup.
It was. Well, because the Centennial Park group believe in nothing that Rulon Jeffs or Warren Jeffs teach. So they are very much separate from the Jeffs following. And that was when some big changes in the FLDS began to happen, was with Rulon Jeffs, and then extreme changes with Warren Jeffs. So I think the Centennial Park group want to be very different and set very far apart from the FLDS, especially now with Warren Jeffs spending his life sentence in prison for abuse.
Yeah, true. Speaking of the Colley family, a huge part of this was continuing on from the last episode, talking about the wives having to get jobs to be able to provide for big families, right? And that's a common question we get all the time. And we mentioned it a little bit in the last episode as well. But the idea of providing for so many people, like 3 wives and 18 children, right? So there's 22 people at dinner every single night. And how do you provide for that many people? And in the last episode, he at first had 1 wife that was working, he's working, and then 2 wives staying at home. And he decided that one of the other wives needed to go and provide for the family as well to make ends meet. But in this episode, the first wife, which is the only legal wife, mentioned something that I was like, we have to talk about this.
Yep.
Because it plays a big part into a lot of how these huge families are able to survive. And the first wife is now at home with 9 kids that aren't school age. So we're talking 9 kids under 5, 3 kids under the age of 1 by herself. Hands down, she has the hardest job out of any of them working. That is insane. But then she said, being the first wife, I'm the only one that's legally married. And we don't want me to be the one to go to work because that gets added to our taxes. Because the husband and her are on the same tax return. And this is where the FLDS got into a lot of legal problems, clear after Warren Jeffs went to prison. But all the other wives in the state of Utah's eyes are all single mothers with a ton of kids.
Because there's no way to prove otherwise.
Yeah, they're not legally married to the first man.
Right. I mean, I guess if they have their address, all the same, registered as the same address. There's that link.
But single moms are allowed to live
But there's
with
nothing
their
against,
families.
yep.
Yeah, you can't say, oh, if you're a single mom, you have to live on your own. No, like single moms need support so they can live with whoever they need to live with.
But it was interesting because she admitted very openly that the reason I don't work is so that we don't have to pay more taxes. And
yeah, so the income can stay low so they can have a 3-income household and only have one being shown on the family's tax returns. The other 2 are single moms. And typically, too, if you are a single mom with 6 kids with a single income, you're going to end up with a lot of state benefits.
Right.
A lot of times you can get food stamps for those kids. You can get WIC, which are all great benefits for single moms to have.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's this loophole of, I can't even say loophole, like I'm sure they need it as well in order to survive, right? But it's a very obvious choice because they're choosing to be in a family. And so at least with the FLDS, there's a lot of food stamp fraud.
Right.
And a lot of things like that where they were using that and then they were getting food and being forced to give it to the church instead of using it to provide food for the children in that family.
Mm-hmm.
And so it ends up in this weird, tricky place when it comes to state-sponsored programs to help single moms, and all these polygamous mothers are having a ton of kids, so they're getting a lot of benefits, but really it's going to a household that does have a father.
Yeah, well, and it's tricky because there's still only one father, right? I mean, if I go back to my childhood in my home, it was a lot of money to provide for a family so large. And so I can see why the state would say, well, I mean, obviously there's a lot of children here and these mothers aren't legally married. So in the eyes of the state, there's no reason not to help them. And I'm sure that because they're doing it for religious purposes and they think that they're doing it because it's what God wants, it's not that they woke up one morning and said, you know what, how can I beat the tax system? Let's go live polygamy, right? It's just they find ways to, if you want to call it, take advantage of it after already believing in this way of life. And I'm thinking back on my childhood. I don't remember the food stamp stuff. I think that came later.
Okay, within FLDS?
Yes, as
and
far
it might
as
have
I
been
know.
different families, right? Because every
That's
family
true.
can do their own thing too. So one family might choose to not use government assistance and to find a way to be able to provide for those children in a different way.
And in my childhood home, my father worked full-time, and his first legal wife, my father's first wife, worked full-time as well as one of the main incomes. So we obviously didn't take advantage of the system, or maybe that sounds bad. We didn't try to get around paying extra taxes by not letting the legal wife work, I guess. And I know that we did have some benefits from the government, though, like WIC. I remember going to the WIC office frequently. So there were some things that were given to us as a family, but I don't remember talks in the family as, hey, let's see how we can not pay taxes, or let's see how we can take advantage of the food stamps or things like that. Maybe it was talked in different rooms than where I was sitting, but I never heard that in my family.
Well, it depends on the polygamous group as well, because you hear things like in the Kingston group, you hear that they talk about bleeding the beast, meaning
Right.
take everything that you can from the government because the government is inherently evil anyway, right? So they try extra hard to make sure that it appears it's a single mother in her own home and to try to get as many benefits as possible. So each group does it a little differently. And ultimately, the whole point in a state having social programs like that is to make sure that children don't go hungry, right? Which is the most important, is for kids to be provided for. It just gets really interesting and tricky when you think like, okay, my tax dollars are going to support people being able to live polygamous lifestyles and have as many kids as possible without having to have the full responsibility of those children.
Yep.
I can also understand where the state would be like, hey, there has to be, like, where's the balance in that, right? But you can't control how many children people have or their reasons for having those children or having children, whether they can support them or not. Like, it's just such a sticky, interesting situation. The one thing the state could control was the FLDS leaders saying, use your food stamps to go get food, but you can't use them for your children. You have to come give us the food. And I think that was where the food stamp fraud was happening within the FLDS.
Oh, yeah, because they were sending all of these single in quotation marks,
Single.
single moms to go get all this food, and then they would literally just bring it and drop it off in the church's bank and say, here's all the food, and then the church would decide whether or not they got to eat. So that's where the big problems came, is the church was just taking advantage, 100% taking advantage of the moms, the children, and the system. So that's a whole different ball game.
Yeah, and just to be clear, I don't know if they didn't talk about, like, the Colley family didn't say specifically that they're using any of those government assisted programs. It was just when she mentioned that she's the one not working in order to not go up a tax bracket for their income, but really they're a 3-income household. It just brought up all these thoughts of all these other ways to be able to make sure that you can have enough income for a family. And so I'm not saying that we know for sure whether or not they were doing this.
Right.
It's just something that is common and happens a lot within polygamous families, and is something that really helps be able to afford that many children. Because that's a question that people have all the time. They're like, it's hard to afford 2 kids. How on earth do you afford 18 children? And
now, before we go start blaming people that live a polygamous lifestyle, right? Because you have to remember, too, that most of these people, we'll get into some converts here, but most of these people are born into this belief, right? So they're born into the belief that their primary purpose is to get married and have children, as many children as possible, because birth control is absolutely not allowed. It's working against God's plan in their mind. So no birth control, get married at a young age, have as many children as possible. So in the eyes of the followers or the members of these churches, they kind of do need some help to survive, because that's just the way that the structure of the church is. So if you want to blame anyone, blame the person that is in charge of all of the religious rules and beliefs behind it, which started long time ago. So you're going to be blaming dead people at this point.
Well, and I don't think, like you said, like, it's really no point in blaming people. We just wanted to point out another way that people are able to survive.
Exactly.
And that, yeah, like you said, it's not an intentional, at least in your community. Well, it became intentional later after Sam left. But, like, depending on the family, it's not necessarily like an intentional, we're going to try to beat the system and take people's tax dollars. Like, it's not done that way. It's done out of them living their faith and then trying to find a way to provide. And a lot of times they are able to do that by using programs.
Yep.
So anyway, that's a very interesting.
Longer than we expected.
That was way longer than we expected. Hopefully we made that clear. It's a sticky situation. That is another way that they provide for their families.
Yes.
The other main thing that they talked about a lot in this was girls picking their husbands. It's still a huge topic. Kelly got Hiram's name. Hiram was in the missionary program for like over 3.5 years. They released him, found out that Kelly, had revelation that she was supposed to marry him. She said she got his name when she was in 10th grade, and then she just kept praying about his name until she graduated. One good thing is it seems like in Centennial Park, they at least wait till legal age, wait till after they graduate high school before they get married. But it was very clear as they were all celebrating, and like all the girls that had just graduated high school were getting together, and they're like, oh yeah, I'm always asking, well, when are you getting married? When are you getting married? Like, it's definitely like, it feels like the culture is, as soon as you're done with high school, it's like time to get a name, time to get rolling. And one of the Colley girls who had graduated high school, she was talking about the fact that she wasn't getting a name coming to her mind, and she just felt confused about who she was going to. So she was going to do, it was called going and
turning herself in. Yep. Which also happened in the FLDS, but we can finish her story
that
first.
was what I was going to say, is that like that's a common term as well. But wasn't it the fathers who used to turn in the daughters in the FLDS?
Yes. Is that a happy scream?
I think that was a happy scream. Yep.
Kids in the background.
Kids in the background. Happy screams.
Moment of silence. See what the kids are up to. Okay, happy screams. We're good. All right. So, yes, there was this thing that Rulin Jeffs, we always called him Uncle Rulin, but Warren Jeffs' father, he had this little black book. And it was very well known that when a father would go and turn in his daughter, that Rulin Jeffs would write down the name of the daughter in the book. And so then he could play a game of matchmaking, which, of course, we were taught that was inspiration from God, not that he was just sitting there, crossing lines to which person. they should get married to. But
was he?
I guess you'll have to decide on that one. But anyway, so he would write down the names in this book, and those names would have been turned in by, like you mentioned, by the father of that daughter. Yes. So in the Centennial Park group, it sounds like. However, her father we haven't gotten to the episode where they actually talked to the brethren, as they call them, but her father was going with her to
help her turn herself
to help turn herself into the brethren, and they can choose who she marries.
And she did talk to her father, obviously, beforehand, saying that that's what she wanted to do, and his thoughts on it, thoughts on marriage, and whether or not she was ready, and all those things. So still definitely talking to the priesthood holder in her family, going to her father would be a common thing. And then from there, them going to the priesthood council to turn herself in. And then they kind of are going to leave it up to the priesthood council at that point to pray about who she should be married to.
Right. And the interesting thing, too, is she actually asked her father, the Kali father, did he ask her about which wife she wanted to be?
Oh.
He asked her.
Yeah.
The father asked his daughter, would you rather be a first wife, second wife, third wife, or just does it not matter to you? And she said that it didn't really matter to her, except for she thought maybe not being the first wife would be best. And that was interesting, but we kind of came up with a theory of maybe why. If you're marrying someone that you have no idea anything about them, because they don't give them an opportunity to date and get to know each other very well at all. So it's basically just you see someone or you hear a name and you get this revelation, and then you're married within a few days, and then hopefully it works out. But if you're the first wife and you know nothing about this guy, who's to say that he's not some
crazy
awful
abuser
person?
Or something? Yeah.
But if as a young girl you see this guy and he already has one or two wives, sorry, different show, one or two wives and multiple kids, and it seems like they're a good, happy family, she's going to feel more secure in trusting this is going to be a good guy. So if you're going to be in polygamy anyway, that seems like a safer way to go.
When they were having a girls' night for Kelly, because Kelly's about to get married at Hiram, right? And they were kind of talking about that dynamic, and some of the other girls were saying the same thing, that they didn't want to be the first wife because then we have to train the husband. But mostly it's like they were kind of mentioning the fact they have to figure everything out. Like, we just have to figure it out with this guy. And I was like, yeah, but normally you like them first. Like, you want to figure it out with your spouse. Like, you're excited for that part. But yeah, if not, then going in and feeling that comfort of they already have probably what they're expecting of you. And here's your box. This is where you go as the third wife, and you're going to help take care of the children that are already there. And you're going to do this. They're already going to have their routine down, and you can just kind of be like a peg in the board, I feel like, rather than trying to create how everything goes. We have a lot of people, we always ask girls whenever they come on, which wife would you have wanted? What wife did you want to be? And I feel like almost no one says the first wife.
Right. And it's interesting.
Because of jealousy too. They're like, then you have to be the wife that sees the other wife come into the family.
Well, one of the girls in the show said, if I'm the first wife, what am I supposed to do? What would we do? No kids. It's just the two of you. And what
for us
that live in monogamy, we're like,
enjoy your time together?
I think there's a few things you could think of doing. It's just so interesting that their mindset is so different when raised in a polygamous lifestyle.
Yeah, well, it's so focused too on children, because that seems like to a lot of these young girls, they didn't even talk about being ready to be a wife or being excited for being a wife. It's almost always, I feel ready because I'm ready to be a mother.
Yeah. That was the same with my sisters.
Yeah. So it's getting married is just okay, well, I don't know what I'm going to do with that guy if I'm the first wife, but at least he can give me kids.
Right.
And, the one girl and her sister had a conversation in this episode where they were saying that's the beautiful thing about polygamy too, is if you can't have kids, then at least you can raise somebody else's children, and you're going to have sister wives that can have kids, and how that was a way to lighten the burden of infertility. And I felt like they are just very young in that.
Well, and they are.
They are. One girl is 18, the other 16, and they're talking about this. They're that's the beautiful thing. And I was I think infertility is something that is so tough. I can't imagine that watching other sister wives be able to have babies when you can't would be a comfort. I feel like that would be a lot harder. to watch everyone around you.
Well, and we saw this in shows like Sister Wives, when Mary wasn't able to have more than one, and all of the other wives were having all these children around her by the same husband. We see, if you've seen Sister Wives, you know how tough that was for Mary, and ultimately caused all kinds of problems. So
so these girls were looking at it optimistically, and I was like, you don't understand how hard I think that would be. But it's definitely one thing that they're just both looking forward to, having children and being able to, she's like, I'm ready for my own children instead of just taking care of my younger siblings. And so that's going to be, even Hiram's bachelor party, they were like, he's like, well, we'll get married and I'm sure we'll just, have a baby in 10 months.
10 months, yeah.
And so I think that's almost like, it's so awkward in a way. And yet the fact that like both of them, the guy and the girl, are taking comfort in the fact that like, we're not going to know what to do with each other, but we know that like we could make a baby and then we could have a baby and then we can focus on that. And that'll be something for us to like focus and connect with.
Yeah, I mean, basically getting married for religious purposes only.
Yeah.
It's all based around religion, their belief, and what they even said something along the lines of having children is the only way that I can thank God, basically, for what he has given me. And having children is a way to say, thank you, God.
Yep. It's the one thing we can do for God. God does everything for us, but that's the one thing that we can do for God, is bring spirit children to this earth.
Once again, going to show that in their mind, that their purpose in this life is to get married and have children. That's their number one. 100%. That's how it was for the FLDS church as well. And that is why it was so tough when Warren Jeffs decided to put an end to marriage, put an end to allowing husbands and wives to have children, ripping families apart. All of these things, he's taking the core beliefs of these people and saying, nope, you can't do any of that. Taking away their whole purpose in life.
Yep.
It's just, I can't even think of the words that I want to say about this man.
Yeah, so
Warren Jeffs is completely separate from these people, though. Just want to make that clear. I keep jumping back and forth because we live so close together. Same fundamental doctrines and beliefs, both polygamy, but obviously at this point, very different ways of living.
Yeah, I think emphasizing, like what you were saying, that, all of it's about the religion. They all said, like, you're not really supposed to be in love before you get married. You're supposed to fall in love after you're married. That's something that's very common within all of these polygamous groups. And then I feel like that was emphasized a little more when after Hiram and Kelly got married, which was I'm sure it was some sort of sealing. They didn't show it on the cameras. Pretty much almost all of Mormonism, the sealing ceremony is pretty similar. But then he took his wife to this tree and he had all these little representations. It was adorable. However, so Sam and I were watching this and I was like, this is really cute because they don't know each other, but because they don't know each other, all they're each hoping for is that they're on the same page with how they feel religiously, because that's going to be the only connecting factor. So he's saying all the right things to a girl who grew up fundamentalist Mormon. He's saying all the right things about, emphasis on God and our future family and having lots of children. And this represents me providing for you. Like, he was saying the perfect things. And I was like, oh, babe, that was so cute. And then what did you say to me?
I said, for those of us that can jump back into that type of belief, and especially for me, I can put myself back in the shoes of living in this polygamous environment and the FLDS beliefs and think, yeah, that's very sweet. That's very, like the words he's saying, that's perfect. That's what she needs to hear. But if you were to watch this as someone that has never been in any kind of Mormonism at all, or even Christianity, possibly not religious at all, it would sound very strange. Very, very strange, because it's a lot about the afterlife. It's a lot about, the eternities and what God wants for us here. And I'm doing this to prove to you that I'm a worthy priesthood holder and man, things like that we don't even think would be strange because we're just used to that terminology. But sometimes when we talk to friends that aren't religious, we just say things like, oh yeah, no big deal, and this was that, and they look at us like, what are you guys? You realize that's crazy, right? Like, it's just so funny that based on the way people are raised, something that could be so normal can be so strange to someone else.
Yeah, so But I will say Hiram said all the right things to his new bride that's within that religion. He was saying and doing all the right things. It seemed like he really wants to be able to make marriage work the way that they know how to do it. And so, they don't know how love in a marriage is supposed to work like that way. So this is all they know. And he did a good job for how they know and what they know.
Considering, and we are very familiar with the doctrine behind why he was saying the things he said. So for us, we could easily accept that, wow, that was probably perfect for her. It was like the vows that she needed to hear.
Yeah,
so he did a great job.
And it was a good opportunity for him to be able to give vow-like things, because for those of you who aren't familiar, a sealing ceremony, you don't get to say vows. So it's not like in a typical marriage where you go and then you're like professing love to one another or saying a vow of some sort. It's just a covenant that you agree to. So you say yes, but other than that, like, even when we got married, there wasn't anything, like, I didn't get to say anything to Sam and he didn't say anything to me during our whole ceremony.
You just agree
to the covenants and you say yes. And you have to, it's yes instead of I do. So they say, do you agree to da-da-da-da and all these covenants? And then you say yes. And then they give covenants to the other person. You say yes. But that is it. So that also I thought was cute, to be able to have something outside of that ceremony where he had a chance to express his feelings, because that isn't something that happens in typical Mormon marriage ceremonies.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and we don't want to spoil anything yet, but maybe at the end when we're doing the next episode, we will do some Googling and see if some of these people are still going strong or where they're at today. And hopefully we can fill you in with a little bit of up-to-date information.
Yeah. Well, if you want to hear more of what it was like for Sam to grow up in polygamy in the FLDS religion, then please like and subscribe.
Yes. Thank you all so much for being here with us. We look forward to talking with you soon.
Talk to y'all soon.